Today's a setup, a kind of a setup Sunday for us, and we're at the beginning of a new year. We're at the beginning of a week, as Dan has announced, where we have a week, our global family is praying and fasting and seeking God. So the message today is about consecrating before you cross over. I'm going to explain what that big word is, but by the time we finish here, I want you to consecrate yourself before you cross over into the next. Because there are things in your heart, there are things that you dream of, that you want to, that are stirring in your heart for this next season, for this next year. But my message to you and I and us is that we must consecrate ourselves before we cross over. And if you do this right, you're going to cross over much better than if you do this wrong. So let's go straight to the scriptures, and we're going to go into the Old Testament passage in the book of Joshua, chapter 3. Now, if you're not used to the Bible, this is in the Old Testament. Joshua is one of those 10 spies, if you've ever heard about them. 12 spies that I was just testing you there. Went to look at the promised land. They saw it. Joshua and Caleb, his friend Caleb, said, "We can do it. God said it. We can do it." The other 10 said, "No, we can't." And then they spent 40 years in the desert wandering towards this promise. What could have taken them a really quick time took them a very, very long time. And so as we get to Joshua chapter 3, they are ready. They are close to this place that they've been pursuing for so long. They've been so close, but they've been on a huge, long journey, a difficult journey. And maybe you've been on a difficult journey. I don't know what your pastors looked like. I don't know what it's looked like to get you from there to here where you are today. You know, maybe you had a great year in 2018. Maybe it's like, it's been amazing, and I'm just looking for more amazing. Maybe you've like, it's been flippin' difficult. It's been like 40 years grinding through the wilderness for me. And maybe it's a bit of a different, but maybe in some areas it's been amazing, and in other areas it's not been that amazing. And I'm sure that's how we all live. We live in this place where the kingdom, we have some of the promise and we don't have some of the promise. And so anyway, I want you and I to get into the story. They've been closing in on this promise, and in Joshua chapter 3, this is where we meet them. And Joshua has just taken over as leader here, so this is there's a lot of new stuff going on here, just like we have over here. And so let's pick up the story in verse 1 over here. And it says this: early in the morning. That's a good way to start, eh? All right, early in the morning. Early in the morning, Joshua and the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. So here we go. Joshua leads these people, and early in the morning they set out from where they were. They'd kind of gone through the wilderness, then got to this place. And now he moves from this place where they've camped for a while, where they've been settled for a while. They move on to just to the river, to the Jordan. They're still on the wrong side of the river. They haven't quite crossed over, but this is where they are. The first point I want to make today is don't settle in Shittim. Now, I know you guys are going to, some of you get a little religious on me, but here's the deal. A lot of us are settling in a place where we should not be. Now, you might be reading a different translation to what I am. All right, this is not a swear word in the scripture. This is just the name of the place in the original language. So some translations couldn't handle that, so they called it Acacia Grove. I mean, just because you change a label on a thing doesn't make it any difference. I mean, if you're going to Primark, don't say, "I've been to Primada." If you've been to Malaga, don't say, "I've been to Malaga." You know, I mean, it doesn't change the fact of what. It doesn't the label doesn't change the place. It's a place. It's in the wilderness. It's not the promise. And the message today to us is don't settle short of the promise. Now listen, Shittim wasn't a bad place there, but it might be a bad place for you. I think this is the message that should have been preached probably was preached when the prodigal son went to church that day from the pigsty. The pastor said to him, "Prodigal son, don't settle in Shittim. You thought this was the place. You thought this was the place, but I want your eyes to be open." And he had a revelation. I don't want to stay here anymore. I don't want to stay here anymore. And some of us need to get to the revelation, I don't want to stay in the sin, in this dysfunction, in this place anymore. I am sick and tired of this place, and I want my eyes to open up to the reality that there is more. That's our promise, isn't it? There is more. We're going to move from here to there. So don't settle. You see, sometimes we settle in places where we should be passing through. We just pass to them, or we just come to them when we settle there because it's comfortable. I mean, Acacia Grove wasn't a bad place there. It was close to the promise. I could probably see, maybe got some news about the promise. Sometimes we feel we're close enough, and we've had such a tough time, and we kind of grind. We say, this is good enough, but we need to know that often good enough is the greatest enemy of best. And I don't know what that means to you, but I pray God will enable you to translate that into your own life. Where is Shittim for you? Don't settle there. And I think there's going to be a bunch of movement this year. I don't know if you have to, please don't move out of London unless the Lord's leading you there. This is still the greatest city in the world, right? But hey, don't settle where you shouldn't settle. So what we see over here is they moved from that place, they moved to the Jordan where they camped. And again, they camped in a place that wasn't the promise. But this is a positive thing that they did. They camped before they crossed over. The challenge is that they don't camp, that you don't camp either where you should, that you don't settle where you should be camping. You're so close, you can see it. You can see the promise. But again, sometimes the temptation is to camp there and say, well, this is enough. But here's something they did. And so the thought here is, don't rush across the river. There was something very special that they did as they got to the Jordan before they crossed over. Often we just rush into the new thing, but the message to them was, don't rush over the river, because the next instruction would be, consecrate yourself first, because tomorrow the Lord will do wonderful things among you. So we're going to speak in a moment about consecration, but why should we not rush over the river? We live in a very, very rushed world, would you agree? I mean, it is fast, it is pace. And here's a word for you and I this year. Let's slow down a little bit. Right? Busy is not a badge, folks. If I ask you, hey, how are you doing? And Andre says to me, Wolf, I'm so busy. You know what that response is going to result in? We will have a shallow relationship. Because what he's really saying to me is, I don't have time for you. I'm too busy. I'm doing important things. I don't have time to talk to you or meet with you or whatever. So we are banning I'm busy from our language. Unless you want someone to pray for you. If you say I'm busy, I'm going to say, let me pray for you. So that you can enter God's rest. Now, I know we're busy. We've got loads to do. Our to-do list so long. But there's a tension there, isn't there? If we live like this, busyness will drive us, and we will rush across the river unprepared, because the point of camping before the Jordan and consecration is to prepare our hearts. Because when they were looking over the Jordan, it wasn't just like, whoa, the promise is coming. I can't wait. They also knew he had gone to spy the land. He hadn't just seen milk and honey and wonderful grapes, had he? What else has he seen? Giants. There were the Amalekites. And there was Jericho. There were all the other ites and the kites over there. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, we're going to do this. There was good and there was challenge waiting for them. And in order to get to Jericho and march around the walls and believe that God would come through for them, they need to go in prepared. And sometimes we don't go into the promise prepared. And so we see the walls, and instead of conquering the walls of Jericho and overcoming, we just go around them and move on. But we've left something and we've moved past something that's going to come back and bite you. So the reason you want to not rush across the river and why you want to pause is to prepare your hearts. Our hearts need preparing for God's promise. Jesus showed us this pattern. Jesus going to the cross. He had to go to Gethsemane first, and in Gethsemane, he wrestles with the Father. What does he say? Father, if you can take this cup away from me, do so. See, if you've got anything great that you're pursuing in your life, you've got a great calling in your life, it is not going to come easy. It's going to be a wrestle. It's going to be a wrestle. Jesus says eventually, as he sweats tears of blood, he says, Father, but not my will, but yours be done. You see, the wrestle is more in our hearts to get our wills lined up with his will. Some of you have got callings and dreams and hopes, but there is a huge cost. And Jesus teaches, doesn't he? Before you go into battle, count the cost. So that when you go in there, you won't be made a fool of. Before you build a tower, count the cost, unless you build it and it's half built and everybody laughs at you. Need some quantity surveyors. People who understand what things cost. And I don't want us to be like that. I don't want us to rush across the river, build half-built towers, fight half of battles, and lose the... That's not the way we're supposed to live. What he says to them is, they camped, and then Joshua and the elders give some instructions. The instructions after this are that they are to there's the ark, and the elders say, listen, when the ark begins to move, you move behind it, you follow the Levites, the priests carrying the ark. Don't go too close to it. This is Old Testament though. And you've got to be sure you're reading, you know where you're reading. So if you read on from this, like all of you are going to do, because you want to go and read the scriptures to see whether what the preachers preached is actually true, right? That's what you do every Sunday, don't you? Oh, yeah. Don't believe it. Anyway, do believe it, but just check it out. If you read on from this, the next instruction is, hey, the Levites are going to get the ark, which represents God's presence, and they're going to start moving across the river. And when that happens, you all follow them, but don't go too closely. And if you read that, you might think, oh, I can't come close to God. But this is Old Testament. See, the old is be careful because there's danger. The new is Jesus saying, come to me, all you labor and are heavy laden. Come to me, come close. You can come. How close can you get to God this year? As close as you want to. As close as you want to. As close as your heart yearns to be with him, you can, because Jesus has made a way. And he says to you, come. And then he says, then here's the consecration verse. So don't rush across the river. This is what it says in verse 5. Consecrate yourself. So you camped at the river, you follow the ark, but before you cross over, consecrate yourself. For tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Or other translations say wonderful things among you. See, consecration is what you do today to prepare yourself for what God will do tomorrow. Consecration is me saying, I want to get my heart right. I want to align myself with your promise. What did I see back then again? Remind me what I saw. What's that promise? What is the promise you made? Because in Deuteronomy 8, for instance, God warns his people. He says, listen, one day, when you get into that promised land, be careful that you do not forget that I was the one who brought you out of Egypt. I delivered you. I was the one who looked after you for 40 years in the wilderness. He says, be careful that when you get there and you start prospering, you don't say to yourself, oh, it was me that gained me all this wealth. Because God says in Deuteronomy 8, I am the one who empowers you to prosper. Don't forget it, he says. And so this is the whole purpose of consecration. This is for us to stop and to recognize that our hearts will very quickly turn towards ourselves. Not worshiping him, but worshiping all sorts of others, and ultimately ourselves. God says, prepare your heart. And if you do this well, what you do today, if you camp well, if you consecrate well, if you prepare well, you will be ready to walk in God's promises. I want us to be that kind of a people. I want us to be that kind of people. So the instruction is consecrate yourself before crossing over. What does consecration mean? It's a big word. We don't read it in the newspaper or hear on the news. Well, it's a word that simply means to take something or someone and to dedicate it to divine purposes. To take something that's ordinary, that's natural, and basically to say to God, here it is, here I am. And this is what God says to them, and He says to us right now, as before we cross over into this next year, and maybe you've already crossed over, maybe your year's like, it's only been a week, and you feel like you've been in a wind tunnel already. Maybe you just kind of got to reverse back over the river this week and just start again, right? Isn't that good news? You can always start again. His mercies are new every morning. And morning isn't when the sun rises, it's when you and I wake up, which is later for some people than others. Wake up to His mercy, His wonder, the gospel. But consecration is this idea of taking what is yours, what is ordinary, what is natural, what you're a steward of, and saying, God, I dedicate it to you. And that's everything in my life. And I want to encourage you. The Romans chapter 12 says that in the view of this, therefore, because, and it's referring to the great gospel, what God has done in Jesus Christ. In the view of this verse, offer your lives as a living sacrifice. The Message translation says, take the ordinary, everyday things and give it to God and see what He'll do. So I encourage us all, let's think what's in your hand. What is yours? What have you got that some things we're still holding like this? And what we want to do with consecration is say, Lord, I'll give it to you. And that would include all that we have. Include our relationships, include our health, our bodies, include our gifts, our talents, include your job. Consecrate your job to Him. See what He will do. What wonderful things. And by the way, the word wonderful or amazing is that word that merely means to do more than you can do in your own strength. To do exceeding above what is expected. So God says, man, if you give it to me, I can take those 5 loaves and few fish and turn it into something wonderful, something amazing. So maybe this week, think about the different things. Think about your finances. Have you consecrated your finances to God? Are you holding that note so tightly that the Queen's got tears in her eyes? Just take it and say, Lord, I dedicate it to you. I will be a good steward of my money, of my finances, of my possessions, not just my money, but my possessions. What I have, Lord, is yours. That's covenant language, isn't it? Not some of what I have is yours. Ali, some of what I have, I give to you. I mean, that's not she's not going to take that deal, is it? Why would God take that deal if Ali won't take a deal? But man, God can do more, can enable you to do more with your 90% or your less than that you keep and that He gives you and I to use than you could ever do with your 100%. Ever. He's no man's debtor. Give to Him what is His and see what He will do. See what He will. Test Him in these things. And that's just, money just represents so much of our lives. That's why I just mention it. It represents so much of our lives. But maybe just list things and say, God, here it is. I consecrate these things to you. One of the ways we consecrate ourselves is through a week of prayer and fasting that we do as a global family. And Dan's already shared the information about that. But this is what we do every second week of the year for the last few years as a global family. We've been doing this probably for 20 years as a church, and many Every Nation churches have been doing this. But from a few years ago, we started doing this globally the same week. And it's an amazing experience that thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world will go through the same devotional, will focus, will pray together, will say, here we are, Lord. And the theme is great faith. And we start tomorrow, and as Dan's already said, but I want to remind you, here's 3 ways that you can get involved. The first one is choose your fast, because you might say, well, I'm too busy, Lord, but you're not going to say that, right? Because we banned that. But you might say, I've got a lot to do. I can't fast. You can fast. You can fast in some way and on some day. Okay? You can switch off your Netflix account. You can get off social media. I'm not saying that you must do that, because you could follow the devotionals on social media. That's legit. You could skip a meal or two, or you could skip all the meals. And here's my instruction, my encouragement to you is stretch yourself a little bit. You are able to do more than you've ever done before. Fasting is an amazing part of consecration because fasting denies you the stuff you want now to make room for the wonderful things God has for you. Fasting isn't really about what you don't do either. It's not about what you don't eat or don't watch or don't engage with. It's what you do, but often we don't do the things because we don't have any space to do them. So we fast and we make space for doing the things that our soul and our spirit craves for, which is time with God. So choose your days and your ways and stretch yourself a little bit. Don't be like in the comfort zone. You know, Ali was in the gym a while ago, and she's told the story before. She was gymming up, and there was someone had a personal trainer, and this personal trainer was training the person, and this person was complaining, and the personal trainer said to the person they were training, "Don't be so kind to yourself." Hey, listen, some of you need to be kinder to yourself because you're so hard. Your guilt and condemnation and judgment on yourself is terrible. So here's a word for you. Be kinder to yourself if that's your problem. Some of us need to be less kind to ourselves. And most of us probably need both, right? In different ways. But hey, let's choose our days and our ways. Follow the daily devotional. Download the app. We sent you an email. If you didn't get the email, give us your details at the Connection Center and we'll get that to you. Check it out on our website. It's all there. But follow the daily devotional. There's a video. There's something to meditate on. There's some scripture. It's fantastic. And then we've got 2 prayer meetings. Come to one of those. Join us and pray. Pray together. God does amazing things when we get together. So and they're at the hub. All right? So those are some ways that we can get involved. Here's what ultimately consecration is about. Because Joshua said this to everybody, and he encouraged everybody to consecrate themselves. But then later on, he had to come back to them and he said, listen, guys, because not everybody was on the same page. Because ultimately, consecration is a choice. Who you give your life to and who you serve with your stuff, with all that you have, is going to be your choice in 2019. Nobody can make you do that, and this is what Joshua says. Ultimately, he gets up and he says to his people, listen, let's bring some order here. If God is God, serve Him. If you want to serve the other gods in Israel, if you want to serve the other gods in London, if you want to serve the other gods of this world, that's your choice. But as for me and my house, we are serving the Lord. He draws a line. He says, this is my choice. And I guess consecration starts for you and me and us when we make that choice. Who will you serve as Lord in this year? Who will you serve? Who will you say, Lord, be my master? And these are the words. The here I am, Lord, are the words that ultimately express consecration. And many great people across the scriptures, as you read the scriptures, get to this place where they say, here I am, Lord. Not just here I am, but here I am. Here I am. And Lord is like He's Lord of all, right? He's not, here's a bit of me, Lord. Here's a half of me, Lord. No, here I am. Here's all of me, Lord. And when you do that, this is the heart of consecration. And His promise is that when you consecrate yourself today, I will do wonderful things, amazing things tomorrow. I trust that this week we will do this with all of our hearts, that you will make a choice to say, here I am, Lord. That you will fully trust God with all of yourself. And you will go on a journey of your faith growing. And you will see God do amazing things in your life this year. Let's stand together. Just consider in your heart whether you can say those words. Here I am, Lord. I consecrate myself and all that I have to you this year. For many of you, this is a recommitment. And for some, it is a new commitment. And on this first Sunday of this year, if it's a new commitment for you, then I pray that you'll make it with all your heart, that you'll begin a journey of following Jesus Christ as your Lord, as your Savior, through faith in Him. I pray that you'll start today. You'll make that decision. Say, Jesus, I believe in you and all that you did on the cross for me. I believe in your resurrection, that you're alive and you forgive my sin and you give me your life. You are Lord of all, and you reign today and you will rule forever. If that's a decision you need to make today, just raise your hand. Everybody's eyes are closed here. Just raise your hand bold and say, Wolfi, today I'm making a new commitment to believe in Jesus Christ and to serve Him as Lord of my life.